right about here is my office. And that was Lenore's birth home. And it was sitting on Napier Plainfield Road in 104th. And we were able to get the developer to bring it over and put it up. So my office is now a stone house right on this corner of the property. So what we try to do is at least educate people that there are conservation groups in your area. And we're doing pretty much anything you can think of conservation-wise. We have a group of people that are cleaning the rivers, and we have groups of people that are buying land and teaching kids, and I do adult education. You name it, we're doing it conservation-wise, and we're not for profit, so we're driven by donations. And you can become a member. They start at $50, so it's not a big thing. And we're protecting land across 7 counties now. We have over 200 parcels we protected. The little dots represent parcels we protected. Some of them have turned into park districts and forest reserves. Some of them are just open space. These 2 white ones out over here in LaSalle County, we still own because there isn't anyone to turn them to. We have some work days coming up and visitation open house days. This one here is by Ottawa, and 250 acres on the Fox River. We're having an open house there on, I believe it's October 12th. But again, you can contact me for any of these opportunities to go and do fun things. There's a book by E.O. Wilson. It's called Biophilia, and it explains that we have a love for life. So it isn't that you're talking to a nature guy today. We all are nature people. This picture is my daughter. I coaxed her to come along with me to the office. I had some work to do, and I told her we'll go try to find some monarchs. So I put her in this field of milkweed, and I said, you can probably find a monarch there. And when I came back, like 15 minutes later, here she has this chick on her finger, and this is a meadowlark. They lay their eggs on the ground, and the advantage of the bird is they don't have to worry about the bird falling out of the nest or anything like that. But the little chick really can't see much when he's on the ground. So the chick has a need to like climb up on something, and there were no trees there, so it climbed up on my daughter. But that's what we try to teach people, is that nature will bring you gifts, and we just have to get out there and see them. And this book is a good one. Also, this Birthright by Stephen Kellert. And this quote, that we'll never be truly satisfied or fulfilled if we live apart and alienated from the environment that we evolved in. So we are nature people. And if here I'm hiking, and on the left, I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail or guiding my son to his first big muskie. When you see how happy people are when they're out in the woods, this is my son and his wife scuba diving in Costa Rica. And you see here I'm kayaking in Monterey Bay. If you ever had a chance to go kayaking in Monterey, California, I would highly suggest it. There's just amazing wildlife. My son and his best friend, my daughter dancing in the Mediterranean at 2 o'clock in the morning. If I asked you where your happiness was, tell me about your childhood and things that you did, most of the time they come back to experiences in nature. You went to your grandfather's farm, you grew up playing by the river, treehouse. Even if you look at your vacations, you go to, I went to Yellowstone last year. This year I went to Mexico and played in the ocean and watched humpback whales. And you can trace where we spend money. Where do we want to be? We get out of town and we go to Wisconsin, we go to Minnesota, we go somewhere where nature is. That's what we want internally. So that's what I work at. I'm a salesman by trade, and I came to work for this conservation group, and I just realized that conservation people do good things, but we don't sell nature. And so the program I started, this Conservation at Home, is a program to market and sell the concepts of nature. We do it on residential landscapes. So this Conservation at Home sign you see here, You can earn one for your yard by implementing some of the things I talk about today. We're trying to get a whole movement for people to get away from chem lawn, get away from the foreign things, and do better things for the environment. If it was a non-residential situation, a church, a school, hospitals, nature centers, we've done county buildings, shed aquarium, over 100 different sites on commercial buildings. And we've also franchised the program so it goes out of our area and covers Cook, Lake, McHenry, all the way out to Rockford. So there are 7 organizations running the program, and over 3,500 residential properties we've certified. Where it starts is that plants are the life of the planet. We don't really think about it enough, that there is no life on this planet without plants. Plants are the only thing that can take the sunlight and turn it into something usable. So understanding there would be no air, there would be no water, there would be no bugs, mice, people, anything on a planet if it was not for plants first. The first things that were here, if they went back to how the planet started, would be algae and these very basic plants started, and then they became more complex, and I'll talk more about that. So once we understand that plants are the basic structure of this planet, then it matters what plants we pick. If you were hungry and there were plants available, and I had a table of them, let's say I had a tree, some sod, some geraniums, and some broccoli, you would certainly go right to the broccoli because you know what's food for you. And the same thing is going on with this hummingbird in this picture. They scan your landscape very quickly, and they determine if there's anything there for me or not. So if you don't have enough hummingbirds, the reason is we filled our landscape with things that hummingbirds don't like. And the evolution of plants is amazing. So we know evolution in animals. We understand a giraffe has this big neck, and we understand why a turtle carries a shell around for protection, or that we understand that a wolf can run really fast to catch the rabbit, but we don't see it in plants. We don't see the root structure. On the far left, under this red arrow, is turf grass. And we've covered the United States with that turf grass substance. I would imagine it, if I looked at your yard, you would have primarily turf grass. And they're not evolved plants here, and they don't function here. They're from somewhere else, and they don't work as well. And when you look at some of the plants, like this is butterfly milkweed right here, and it's one of the plants that the monarch butterfly would need to lay eggs on, and how we could implement these into our landscapes. It's a very beautiful plant, and there's no reason why we can't use that instead of some other things that we have. The native plants are working. They're creating soil, they're creating water, they're implementing all of these features, they're attracting wildlife, and they function, they do things. So if I was to calculate any plant that you had and determine if it was a functional plant or a decorative plant. So they'll fall into 2 categories. Plants from other places don't work well here. They're not integrated into our ecology, so they don't work. They're just sitting there pretty, and they have to be darn pretty in order for them to work. Inside the house, you wouldn't think of having all non-functional things. If you had plastic flowers, or you had, draperies or something like that, that's fine. But you have to have the microwave, the stove, the refrigerator, the couch, those things that you use, your bed. You need functional things, and then you can have the little decorative things. But if you cover your yard or your house with non-working things, just pretty things, we're going to lose the function. And that's where these native plants come in. And it's easy for me to sell birds. The birds that you want are coming here for bugs, is their main food. Now they will come for a snack. This grouping here will come and have seeds at your feeder. This little downy woodpecker here will eat from suet. These will come for a snack periodically, but they cannot live off of what you put out in the bird feeder. Their main diet is bugs, and the bugs are on those native plants I was talking about. Even this hummingbird, he's sitting on a feeder here. We put sugar water in the feeder, and that's the same as me drinking a Pepsi. It gives me a little boost of sugar and a boost of energy, but it's not sustainable for me to live on drinking sugar water. So even the hummingbird, he's eating, this is a male, he's eating bugs. He eats ants, and that's protein, which they need. So understanding that without the plants, we don't get the birds, because the plants bring the bugs bring the birds bring the hawk. The whole ecosystem functions at the basic plant level. And we're going to get how this ties into recycling here fairly quickly. The next group of plants, and this one up here is the one my daughter had on her finger. This is the meadowlark. This is the bluebird, even the little wren. This little one down here sings so sweetly. And we put up a wren house because we like to have them in our yard. We want them, but we don't even have a clue what they eat. All this grouping here, 100% bugs. The whole story, you've heard the story about a snowbird. Your grandparents go to Florida for the winter. That whole snowbird story was these bugs. They cannot survive here in the winter because they eat bugs. Our bugs are frozen and gone. So they go to south and they eat bugs throughout the winter down in Arkansas and Florida and wherever south of here. And if we want them in our yards, we have to have the right plants. Many of these birds, this is a scarlet tanager, this is cedar waxwing, indigo bunting. Many of these birds here, including the oriole, will switch to berries. So after they feed their babies insects, they will switch to berries in the later summer. So if you put a serviceberry or a viburnum, dogwoods, native berry shrubs, they will come and feast on those berries later on. But without the right landscape, you don't have these birds. And if you don't have them, there's a direct relationship to your landscape. We work with park districts because a lot of us now are not watching our kids play softball anymore. So we're walking our dogs or we're walking our grandchildren, and having nature areas in our parks is a big thing. So we work with the park districts to convert some of these creeks and non-ball fields to beautiful native areas. This is a site we worked on in Naperville, and I try to get everybody to look at the property they have with a different eye, that, you know, this property here could be this. And we created a path to get people in it, but it's all native plantings. This is Penstemon digitalis. That's the heart medicine that they derived from this plant. There's wild indigo and there's prairie dropseed here. These plants have a lot of function. These prairie dropseed here, they've found that it will metabolize gasoline. So they're using it on gas stations because it can tear apart gasoline into the carbon atoms and actually clean up soil. It's amazing things the plants are doing. We don't see them. They just look like, oh, that's a nice plant, not understanding that they're working every day. So composting, the whole idea is not wasting. So we have things in our yard, whether it's grass clippings or leaves. Down here, we're looking at vegetable from our kitchen scraps. And instead of throwing them into the landfill, can we turn those into something that we can use, not waste that? About 20 to 55% of the waste we have in our kitchens and house comes from organic waste. So that throws mostly kitchen stuff, paper and leaves and things like that that we bag up and put out by the curb. By reusing that organic material, we reduce the methane created when that rots in a landfill. We're going to focus tonight about creating healthier soils, how it can improve your yard. We don't have to put fertilizer chemicals on our property, so you save money and your plants grow better. So it's a win-win situation for everybody if we can utilize that organic material. When I went to a yard, they told me, let me show you where it floods every spring. And this picture on the left is the area we walk to. So the reason I put this in here is many areas in our yard, yes, they flood in the spring, but then by June, it could look like a desert. So some of these plants that we have across our area, the adaptations have gotten over the years is that they can understand, or they've adapted to the fact that we have weird climate here in Illinois. We have heavy rains in the spring, and then we have a drought we're just in right now. Our plants are very dry now, but they've held the water in their soil through that organic material that they build into the water, into the ground, and they can survive these droughts. This ground on the left here you're seeing is heavy clay. Across northeastern Illinois, we have heavy clay soil, and much of the topsoil, if you live in a subdivision, your ground was maneuvered with bulldozers, and a lot of that rich, thick topsoil that was created by the prairie has been scraped off, and they sold it. You're seeing piles, and you can buy topsoil. What you have is compacted clay underneath with a little bit of topsoil. It's very poor soil in your typical yards. So how do we fix that? And the answer is put the plants back that can make better soil, and then not throw away the organic material that we have. So this clay soil on the left is begging for organics. So the heavy clay needs to be broken up. You can put some things on it like gypsum would be one thing you could soften the soil with, but organic material is what it needs. It needs leaves, it needs kitchen scraps and all of that. Leaves are one of the biggest things that we can do. So most people think of them as a problem. They bag them up, they buy paper bags and fill them up and put them out by the curb, and you pay someone, or in some communities, they rake them out to the curb. If you rake them out to the curb, they end up going into the storm drains and flushing into the rivers as they break down, and that is causing a tremendous amount of problems in the river systems. So if we could chop up the leaves, keep them in our garden beds, use kitchen scraps, mix the two together, it helps the soil, it helps the insects. You can kill grass or unwanted plants by covering them up with these leaves, and by spring all the leaf mulch will be usable again, and you can add it to anywhere in your yard, soil, garden, just even where you're growing your grass. Certainly it would be very good around the trees. And speaking of trees, on the right here is a white oak tree. This is a red oak. And these trees have never been growing with grass around them. Any forest you went to, a natural forest, does not have grass. And if you went to the Morton Arboretum or anywhere else, they would tell you that grass is the worst thing you could have on these trees. So if you really love this tree, get the grass away from the tree. The second thing is, well, it's because the grass can't breathe, and it sheds water. So the trees are starved for water and air in the root systems. Many times they bring a root up to the surface. You'll hit it with a lawnmower or something. That's indicating that that tree is not happy and is trying to get more air or water. But the other thing is, when all these leaves fall, now the leaves are the food for the tree, and they drop their leaves, fully intending that all that rich organic material is going to feed that tree over the years. And instead, we can't have these leaves here on our precious grass. So we rake these up and we haul them away, and that is the food for the tree to regenerate itself. And it doesn't kill the tree directly, but it makes the trees weaker, and our trees are not living like they used to. The oak tree would live 300 years. Now they're lucky to get 100 years out of them before they start getting diseased or crack open or ants get in them. Some problem happens because they've been weakened by improper way we treated them. Even the lawnmower running over the top of this, the weight of the lawnmower can compact the soils and things that would not be a normal thing for a woods. So what are we talking about? How do we create these functional areas? And in this picture on the left, we've taken the area around the tree out of grass, and we've put the leaves back in here and composted those leaves, and we grow beautiful plants in here, maybe a little walking path, but not the lawnmower going over. And we put in Virginia bluebells and other beautiful plants in these areas. I'll show you some more pictures of some of the things. Like here, this is woodland geranium. So we think of the geranium now as some plant that dies and we go buy it again next year. Well, the real geranium is the native geranium that comes back year after year after year in the shade. This is blue phlox back here, woodland phlox. It's so pretty flower, and it comes back every year. It's got a beautiful fragrance that just is amazing, as probably fragrant as a lilac would be. These are these green things here. When you say, well, grass won't grow in my shade, these are sedges. And we have back here, there is Solomon seal, and there's celandine poppy, wood poppy, and some other things. So a native planting can be pretty in these shade areas too, and utilize all those leaves back in. Now, if we're not going to blow them back into their beds, we can put them in composters. This is the ones that we sell. We sell this stationary composter, and we sell a tumbling composter here. You could use wire mesh. You can use pallets like here, these bins like this. I have two stationary composters. One for I keep adding things into it, and the other one's done, and I just turn the material in here, take the top off, and put a pitchfork in and turn it while it's working. And then you take it out of this one, and then you keep going from the other one. You go back and forth between one and the other one. One's sitting and working while the other one has new material being put into it. You can pile composting like this. Just pile it up and let it go. It takes a little longer this way if you're not turning it. We get leaves from whole communities, bring us leaves at the farm. So they bring truckloads of leaves and pile them up, and we just turn them with a tractor. You can even bury this stuff in your garden. You could dig a hole and put leaves and compost in a hole and throw dirt on top of it and just let it be that way. So there's many different ways that you can utilize the compost, and it's pretty simple. So what we tell people is has it been a plant? And if the answer is yes, things like coffee grounds came from a coffee bean. That is a coffee plant. Yes. Paper products came from a tree. So most of those, you don't want to put as much things like shiny advertising pages or all the color from comic pages or something like that, because those chemicals are going to go in there, which could be used in your garden and maybe would be bad. So typical office paper would be fine. Other leaves and debris and old branches, different things that you had in the yard, yes, you can compost that. What you don't want to compost is animal products. So no meat, no bones, no cheese, not the eggs themselves, but the egg shells are good because they're a source of calcium. So pretty simple what you can put in, what you shouldn't put in. And the eggshells, again, are exceptions. Dog hair, any kind of hair, really. Even if you could get hair from like a barber shop, that's a good thing to compost. Fingernail clips, clippings, things like that are natural things that would be fine to compost. Even dust from the house, cat hair, other things that you vacuum up. I get a lot of dog hair in my house that I have in the vacuum cleaner, and I put that right in there too. That you can segment your materials into greens and browns. So the green are the wet stuff, grass clippings, fruit, vegetable scraps, coffee grounds. And then the brown stuff are dried things, so dried paper, cardboard, ashes, twigs, leaves, things like that. You want to mix them. You can put layers, a layer of green, then a layer of brown, and turn them into each other, so that a nice combination of the two is what you're looking for to make it go faster. And again, it said in this segment here that you can't put your pet waste in there, and what it comes from is what kind of pet do you have. If you have an animal that eats meat, like a dog or cat, that would not be something you could put in there. If the animal eats grain, like a chicken, a rabbit, goat, or a sheep, then yes, those would be excellent to be putting into your compost bin. So again, if you think of it that way, what does the animal eat? If you had a hamster or a gerbil or any other thing like that, they're eating all grains, and that would be a wonderful thing to add to your compost bin. So how does it work? There are microorganisms in rotting food, and they break down with air and water and create heat. And the waste then becomes finished, what they call it, and that means that it's ready to be utilized by plants. So it's I throw even things into my waste, like I have the heavy clay, so sometimes I'm digging a hole and there's big chunks of clay. I throw them right in the compost, and they break apart in the compost and add to the soil. So then I can fill holes with the compost, which has parts of dirt in it and things like that. So again, you're trying to create a finished product, and it doesn't smell anymore. It's not rotting. It smells like dirt, and it's very usable and nice, crumbly soil by the time it's done. If you had problems with it, then it's either too dry or too wet. And if it's too dry, you add water or wet material, greens, like salad waste and things like that is very wet. And if it was too wet, then you add brown stuff to it, leaves. So I keep a garbage can with a lid snapped on it, and I fill it full of ground up leaves that I can use. So during the winter and the spring, I have a lot of kitchen scraps and a lot of greens going in, but I don't have enough browns. So I save my leaves from the fall in a garbage can with a lid right next to the compost bin, so that when I'm dumping my greens in, then I can also add some brown. I have a 5-gallon bucket outside my back door, and I also gave one to my mother so she can compost. And it has a snap lid, and you just open up the snap lid, put in your kitchen scraps, and snap the lid down. No smell. When the bucket's full, I switch out the full one for an empty one and dump them into my compost bin. The compost works much better in the summer. A lot of these bins are dark colored to create some heat in there. During the winter time, it will compost, but it's much, much slower because it's cold, and the organisms don't move very quickly. So only on warmer days will they really start working as much. So it just goes slower in the winter. but you can still keep filling the compost bin. And I'll empty my last year's one completely empty and use all that compost so that I have an empty one for the winter time, because it's not going to go down much. I just keep adding to it over the winter. I haven't seen this happen, but if you had a ton of citrus, then it could start smelling bad. If it was too acidic, we don't get a lot of that problem here. You have enough mixture in it. Maybe if you lived in Florida or somewhere like that, you'd have issues, but we don't get this much. I throw it in there anyway just to let people know. Vermicomposting is a way of doing it with worms. There are bins you can buy. Something as simple as this here is just a Tupperware type of bin. This is a 4-layered compost vermicomposting thing. The worms will work their way through these areas, and it's surprising. It doesn't smell, and there's a spigot right here where you can drain off the liquid, which is like liquid fertilizer. And we had one of these bins on the porch, and a lady's desk was right there. And I brought a school group in, and I said, "This is the vermicomposting bin here." And she heard me tell the kids that this bin was full of worms. And after that class, she came up to me and she goes, "You got to get that out of there." And I said, "Why? It's been there for 5 years, longer than you've been here." And she said, "Well, I didn't know it was there, and I hate it." And I said, "Why do you hate it?" And she said, "Well, there's full of worms." And I said, "They don't make noise. They don't smell. You didn't even know they were there for the last 3 years. And they're not going anywhere." And she goes, "Well, I hate knowing they're there." And I said, "That's not my problem. That's your problem." But it should be a good thing that we can have things compost right next to your office, and you don't even know it. And we're making soil. We're doing all these good things using creatures, worms. You can get the worms. They're not typical night crawlers, but you can get them at your bait store, hardware store. So they're not the night crawlers. They are red wigglers, and they're readily available at most bait stores. You can also buy them online if you wanted. So you can Google if you had issues. There's ways to fix them. I rarely had issues. If it's wet, I don't add paper as much as I add my leaves. Too much food is not an issue. I cover, when I'm dumping in all the food waste, I cover it with the leaves. And you put your leaves on top, and most of the ones you want to put your kitchen scraps in, you want to have that covered so you don't get raccoons coming in there at night or something like that. The ones that I showed you are covered ones for kitchen scraps. Those open ones are ones that would be fine for leaves and yard waste. Again, I don't see these problems. So we try to teach people that, the whole composting idea is just part of making your yard more eco-friendly, using the native plants, improving our soil, keeping the water. We do a lot of work with people on water issues. So the plants will suck up a lot of water problems. If you have water sitting in the yard, you put the plants in, boom, it's gone. So there's a lot of things that you can help yourself with and grow plants. And compost is just another thing that you're going to help yourself by not wasting all this organic material. Maybe you didn't know that what your soil is missing is organics, and then all these organics you're throwing away. So you could go out and buy it. You'd have to buy peat and manure and turn it into your soil, or just utilize a lot of the things that you already have in your yard and make your yard better and waste less. So I'll take questions at this point. That's what finished compost looks like there.
Thanks, Jim.
And if not, there's a way to reach me on email. And if you call again, use the extension 115.
Great, thank you. We have one question. I wonder if it may have already been indirectly answered, but the question is, can oranges go into the compost bin?
Yes.
Yeah.
All those citrus things can go in. You don't, I don't know if you had like 100 oranges, it might be an issue, but the 1 or 2 oranges here or the 1 or 2 grapefruit there, I put my limes, lemons, all those things in with the mixture of other things. It's kind of, if you just think of it like a balance, that as long as you keep it balanced with the browns and greens, don't put 100 lemons in there, but you have some lettuce, some tomatoes, some cucumbers, a couple of limes, everything mixed together in a balance, and you won't have any problems at all.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen ratios out there before, but is it just kind of like you get a feel for what the balance is as you're...
They make it sound very difficult, and it's not. It's just a matter of moderation is what I tell people. You just, and normally in life, you don't have 100 tomatoes or whatever, all at one thing at one time. And if you did, you just balance it with something else.
Gotcha. Do you have any other questions, Teresa?
No, that was helpful. I just heard at some point in the past, don't compost dairy, meat, or oranges. So we hadn't been putting oranges in, but we will now. And our compost, I think it's definitely too wet. We just compost food, and then I always tell my husband, throw some leaves in there in the fall. But I think we need to save some, like Jim, you mentioned that you do.
Yeah, and I mean, some people will shred, have a paper shredder, and they shred their ComEd bills and other things anyway. If you had that shredded paper, that is similar to leaves in that it's dried material, but it works well with me. I have pine trees, and I use pine needles also.
Oh, that's a really good point. Okay.
Yeah, pine, people have a misconception there that the acidic part of pines is when they're green, but by the time they turn brown, they're just like a leaf kind of a thing. So you can layer in pine needles too. Or in some of this stuff, like if you wanted to, if you had a lot of that soupy kitchen scrap stuff, just dig a hole in the garden and dump a bunch of it in there and cover it with soil.
Okay, good to know.
I've seen people even use a 5-gallon bucket. They cut the bottom of the bucket out and they bury it so that the bottom of the bucket, so that the soupy stuff can drain away. You could do it right in a 5-gallon bucket, and if you had a small yard.
Okay.
I hope that was helpful for people, and hopefully we reached them more on the Facebook program.
Yeah, we had some eyes on us on Facebook. I have a question. Do you generally keep maybe you mentioned this, I'm sorry if you did, like a countertop bin for your food scraps? Is that something?
I do,
okay.
But a lot of people, there's controversy because like one of the guys at work, his wife said, no garbage on my counter. Yeah. And so some of the things I've seen people do, he has like a Tupperware thing in the freezer. So he has a little container in the freezer and he opens it up, puts his stuff in there, snaps the lid down, goes back in the freezer. When that thing is full, then he takes it outside.
Interesting.
So I get away with
we've got a mini garbage can next to our regular garbage can. So it's on the floor, but it's still in the kitchen. Okay. And it doesn't take up freezer space. I don't know.
And I have right around the corner outside my back door, I have the 5-gallon bucket with the snap lid. So it's not far for me to, if I have if I'm making big salad for somebody and I have a lot of material, I just take it right outside.
Got it. Thank you so much. Any other questions or anything else before we finish?
No, just thank you to the Aurora Library for bringing this, and
Thank
thank
you
you,
very much.
Jim, for all of your information.
Sure. And if I can, you know how to get a hold of me if there's anything I can help with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Very good.
Thanks for being here. And yes, thank you so much, Jim, for sharing again. Informational and valuable.
Reach out to me and we could do this again in the spring or whenever you want.
Absolutely. That sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, bye now.
Good night.
Good night.